They say we should have known better than to fall so deep down into this rabbit hole.
Get
we found.
ready. It's time again to venture down the rabbit hole into the world of cybersecurity. You're plugged into the podcast for security leaders and practitioners with a business sense. Prepare for unique interviews, insights, and practical advice that makes your job just a bit easier. And now, please welcome your guides on this adventure, James Jardine and the White Rabbit, Rafal James.
Alrighty, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening wherever you are and whatever you're doing. Thanks for joining us in the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Welcome down the Security Rabbit Hole, and this is Raph. I have James with me as always. James, how are you?
Another wonderful day. You know, this is gonna be fun, I think.
If the pre-recording banter is of any indication, we have lots and lots to talk about. Our guest today is Mr. Michael Hill. Michael, I am going to let you introduce yourself. And by the way, for the audience that's not going to listening to us, that's not watching the video, at any moment, Michael may have a flying cat. We're really hoping for a still frame of that at some point. So, with that, why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself?
No, here's the kitty.
Oh, come on. It does not get you. Hold on. Bring that back. I'm sorry. That is adorable.
Oh, yeah.
I do like the fact that he is now perching the cat up so it can jump on his head later.
Yep. No, he will.
That is the most adorable kitten. Wow. Wow. Is that a Siamese?
Well, no, he's flat-faced, fluffy
Looks
kitty.
like a Persian.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
That's
what happens when your wife gets a cat, but she goes to work every day, and you work from home. So it becomes your cat.
Yes, I know that. All right. Now for the intro. Now that we've introduced the cat first.
So that's Mochi. But I'm Michael Hill. I spent 30 years in federal law enforcement as a computer scientist. So I investigated just about every type of cybercrime that you could think of. My last 3 years, I was a program manager over the computer scientists. So I deployed them, put them on projects, did things like that. I currently work for one of the largest DFIR companies in the world, doing incident response, and probably do this for the next 10 or 15 years before I finally settle down and retire. Maybe. I don't know if I can retire, but
nice. James and I were talking, and I mentioned to him yesterday that you and I yesterday had one of those Eagle River moments where we had realized how long we'd been using the Encase tool set. And James has we're talking. He just reaches back in his bookshelf. All right, for you guys, you don't want to watch this video. Pull that back just a little bit, James, into the camera. Pull it back, over. There you go. Check that out. 2006 study guide from Guidance Software. Giddy up. Like I said to Michael yesterday, I still have. I remember using the dongle in like 2001, 2002, where it wouldn't work unless you had that little red dongle and the USB one, and. The IDE write blockers. Oh, baby.
Oh, I still carry them. I mean, I have them personally. I have a whole bunch of Tableau equipment. You know, I have a T8U, I have a TD2U, I have the T35U, and I have the whole adapter set. So, nice. I mean, I love it. I love the Tableau stuff. It's the best stuff out there.
After 30
you can
years,
duplicate
that
drives.
type of gear, you know.
You do. You accumulate. I have cartons in the garage that just in case. You never throw that stuff away because you just never know, man.
I'm the same way. My wife doesn't get it. She doesn't get it. She's like, "What are you doing? You haven't used this." And I'm like, "If I throw this away, I'll need it next week. I guarantee."
That's exactly.
If I throw that parallel cable printer cable away, I may run into a dot matrix printer where I have that. There's no excuse for that one. There's no serial port printers anywhere ever. But
you say that.
I know right now. But I've been to the airport and I watched the dot matrix. The dot matrix printers. I bet you those are all serial. Oh man, hey, when's the last time you had to pull out an IDE ribbon to mirror a drive or image an IDE drive. Remember those old things?
Probably about 18 months ago. I was helping a friend. They had an incident at their doctor's office, and I was helping him image all his equipment. And
the
they had
medical
a couple
industry.
of old servers. Yeah, I mean, they had these old Dell servers, and you opened it up, and sure enough, it's an old IDE drive, and you can hear it spinning, and you're afraid to power it off because you don't know if it's going to turn back on.
At this point, yeah, because it's been running for 15 years.
That's what he said. He said it's probably been 10 years, and he forgot it was there. I mean, because it just ran. And
I had that experience with a Novell NetWare a couple of years back.
Novell. Oh yeah.
Yeah, remember Novell? I mean, it's been a while, but we were upgrading Novell, and they wanted to image all the drives just in case something happened. And we realized that we could only find 3 out of 4 of the Novell servers, and one of them, when they redid the office, one of them was actually in between 2 walls, and nobody had noticed for like 2 years. It just happily ran. Nobody needed to do anything with it.
It's one thing to encase your stolen drug money inside the wall, but to encase your server in the wall, that seems like it's a little excessive.
Yeah, no, I hear stories like that all the time where they have construction and, the construction people don't know any better, so they run the cables through the ceiling, drop it down, and they literally put sheetrock around the server, and they're just in the walls. And until something happens, none the wiser. Things are working. I don't have a clue where that server resides.
Is that something happening? Overheating? I mean, that's right.
Yeah, you would think, but no, it happens all the time. I mean, I was helping a client.
I know. I'm gonna start putting all my servers in the walls. I guess this seems like a brilliant idea.
Yeah, I was helping a client about 6 months ago, and they discovered about 100 extra domain controllers on their network they didn't know existed. And
wait.
Just where were they?
100?
Yeah, 100. I mean, they had no idea. They found out that they had a policy where they allowed people that had certain titles the ability to stand up servers, and so they were having all of these individuals in their group stand up domain controllers for their group of people, kind of like the hierarchy chart. So they had all these domain controllers for all these down the hierarchy, and they had no idea they existed because they weren't being managed by their policy or anything like that. And we did I wrote a PowerShell script that interrogated the network and brought back all the host names and all the accounts. It was hilarious, man.
You say hilarious. I just got a sudden a shooting pain in my head and some PTSD. Oh my God.
This is like the exact reason why they're, like everybody says you have to know what you have. Inventory.
Seriously.
Oh, you'd be surprised how many don't. I mean, they just, between mergers and acquisitions and growth and shrinking, they really don't have a clue. And, you go to especially education institutions, they really don't know because they allow professors to stand up machines for their classrooms. I teach at 2 universities and I can stand up what I want. And if I don't let them know that it's there and I accidentally leave it running, it could be there for a month or 2. And who knows what it's doing during that month. So, yeah.
Or a decade. Yeah, whatever.
Or a decade, yeah. No.
Hey, so speaking, you mentioned university. I know this is something we wanted to bring up. Talk to me about the field of forensics, bringing new talent in, because we've got a industry that has, since I had my in-case training 21 years ago, my in-case training is now officially legal to drink. How's that? That makes it old, and that makes, oh God. Let's move on. Look, the specializations have gone hyper special, right? It used to be that, that one training allowed you to do anything. Now it's IoT, OT, Linux, Mac, Windows, and very specific types of specialties within it. How do we get? Because this isn't a field you just jump into one day and go, all right, I'm gonna go do some forensics now. Because that's not how that works.
No, you have to have some interest, and so I teach cybersecurity courses, and part of that is forensics. And then I have a friend who also teaches at a university, and I build him VMs and classrooms for him to use for his students. And you really have to find the students that have the interest. But it's changed. I mean, like you said, in the old days, there was really only one way to image a machine because there was only a couple products out there, and you would literally you'd put a card in, attach your cables, attach your magneto optical drive, run your little batch file, and image the host. That was it. No cloud, no big servers, no anything like that. Where now, I mean, now you've got Azure, you've got AWS, you've got Google, G Suite, you've got 365, you've got on-prem stuff, and it's all hybrided together. And so you don't have that one guy. Like in the old days, there was one guy you went to who was your specialist, and now there isn't that one guy. Everybody has a little bit of a specialty. But even the equipment, I mean, in the old days, I would come in with 2 or 3 suitcases full of stuff because the equipment was bigger and everything like that. Now I carry my 3 or 4 Tableau stuff, and I carry, Encase, portable Encase, and I carry Encase, forensic imager, and I have everything I need right there. I can do everything I need while I'm on site. But as far as teaching goes, you really have to. It's changed a lot because you have to understand Microsoft, you have to understand Linux, you have to understand Mac, you have to understand all that because they're all hybrided together now in one big environment. And so you have to specialize the classes. Like if I go do a forensic examination of just a normal Windows box, there's the normal artifacts. But if I'm on a domain controller, now I have other artifacts, and I have to teach you what those artifacts are. Linux, all the different flavors. And then you got AWS Linux, who decided they didn't like everybody else's Linux, so they came up with their own. I mean, and half the stuff doesn't run on them, and so you have to teach that. And it's challenging because, and most of the coursework isn't up to date. And so when I teach it, I'm very fortunate. I actually load up Encase, and I have all my students join my session, and I walk them through a typical acquisition using Encase and show them how to take the image, load it up, do all the processing, and then go in and look at the stuff, because that's not in most of the curriculums, because by the time I write the book and get it published, it's a year old.
Yeah, it's outdated.
And it's outdated already, and things are changing so fast that if you don't take the time to make your own labs and make your own material, your students will come out understanding the industry, but no way you could sit them down and say, process this for me.
All right. Yeah, so let me ask, because we can split this up into the technology that you have to know, and then the theory and the practice of what you have to do. Mm-hmm. Okay, right? The theory and practice, probably whether when you're looking for something specific, evidence of X, right, yep, or evidence of not X, that probably has a longer tail, a longer shelf life, say, of the learnable material, than, say, imaging a Windows 10, whatever version we're on,
sure,
or this kernel version of Linux, right? How do you teach those separately?
So,
or do you?
I do. So, and you can teach anybody how to walk in and take a forensic image. I mean, there's not a lot of thought process with that. You give them a list of about 5 or 6 things to look for, and as long as they go down the list, anybody can make a forensic image. And anybody can do push button forensics. I take that image, I load it into one of the programs that are out there, I push go, and I take the reports that it produces, and I'm done. You can teach anybody to do that. It's getting down into the nitty gritty, like you said, where I'm looking for a specific artifact. I'm looking through the MFT, I'm looking through the J file, I'm looking through user assist or Amcache. The dates on Amcache aren't accurate. Then I got to go look through user assist or something like that. It's a lot of steps, and it's a lot of time. And you have to teach how the artifacts relate together, what artifact relates to which one, and patience. You got to have patience. And, a lot of times students, they want it done now, and you see them and they click and they click and they don't get the answer, and they'll go kind of down about halfway and then they'll stop and just say that's the answer. And you're like, but look at this, because this points you over to here. And so you really have to, I take, 3 hours, most of my sessions are about 3 hours long, and we'll just go through step by step by step. This is what we found. And I ask them, what do you think? And we have video and everything. So everybody's talking and everybody's seeing each other. And I'm like, why do you think that? Okay. And then we get the class discussion going, and then we move to the next one. What do you think about this? And you can tell the students that like it, because they're the ones that talk more and they're the ones that do more. And you can see them clicking on their keyboard and you can see them doing other stuff. But sometimes it can be draining. You can spend 12 hours in front of the computer trying to find that one thing you're looking for. And then when you find it, it's like Christmas, man. So,
how much of that, though, changes that capability from, I just need people to be able to think critically in those scenarios, versus the need for them to understand specific versions of operating systems or different areas? We can pick that up, right? It's more of the, can you do the other part?
You can.
Of putting that stuff.
It's the theory.
Isn't that kind of what the tech's supposed to do?
And the logic, thinking, and the ability to put the pieces together that you can't teach. Either I understand. It's like math. Either I understand math or I don't understand math. Either I'm able to follow it through and visualize in my head, or I'm not. I can teach documentation about Windows operating systems all day long. There's books and books and books. If I have this version of Windows, I know these artifacts are here. But the ability to look at it and go, boy, I've seen that code before, or I've seen that string before. That looks like this one. That looks like this one. And then to logically think, well, take Mimikatz. Everybody knows what Mimikatz is, credential stealer. It's been modified, but it has still characteristic strings that it always. And once I see those, right, I've seen that before. That means they're doing this. So now I logically think, wait a minute, if they're still in credentials, that means they're doing this. You have to have some. You can't teach that. There's just some level of understanding that either you get it or you don't. And it takes a lot of years to get really, really good at it.
Well, that's the part that guys, that's the part that concerns me a little bit. Is this? I heard a great talk a number of years ago. I think the guy that was on stage was giving it was a conference. He was the head of forensic accounting, or he had a specialized forensic accounting group at a major bank.
Oh, yeah.
And he was the CISO, and he was talking about his group, and he's like, look, I hire a bunch of accountants that understand technology and let my tools do a lot of the work. He goes, but it doesn't always work that way. He's like, like finance is a specific place, right? Because you need to be able to, like what you just said, Michael, about being able to say, okay, if this, then that potentially means this, or this, and I've seen that before, or I read it about somewhere, or I know what this, intuitively know what this means. Yeah. And when you're looking at numbers and finance that way, that potentially works. But how much does the technology that you're using, and I'll give you the reason why I'm asking this is back when I did this a number of years ago, we used, there were scripts or specific, hey, if you wanted to go look for all the files that didn't have, that all had the same, for example, creation date stamp, right? Mm-hmm. You could go run that. And that meant that somebody, if you found enough of that across a number of different directories, you're like, that's weird. Operating systems don't normally do that, right? And so, but that was all pre-built for me. All I had to do is go, I think I'm going to look into this. I'm going to look into this. I'm going to look into this. And the tech would do that for me. And then I did the analysis. Is that still the case? Is technology getting to the point where it can make up for some of that lack of experience? And essentially, I don't know, maybe teach as you go, or I don't know what that would be, but
it is to a point. The programs that they use, are getting better and better and better. They're getting better at carving, and they're getting better at finding deleted files, slack space, unallocated, all that. But I mean, you take Ncase, and Ncase has the ability to do nscripting, which
Right.
if I'm a good coder, I can write nscripts and have it go and do things that the programs don't normally do. And so if I know I have a particular type of file that isn't carved out, I can write an nscript to go look for what I know about that file, and it will go and carve to my specification and find the file, or I get a better chance of finding the files. And that's where the technology breakdown is. Technology is getting better, and it is, but you still need people that think outside the box. So, because, I mean, the threat actors are getting smarter. The threat actors are more sophisticated than we are, and they need to hide their stuff, and they need to cover their tracks. And so they're coming up with new ways to do that. It's the guys that do that kind of stuff go, wait a minute, that looks different. Let me see if I can find that. And so then they take time and write a script to do that. And, and then they process it. And NK scripting really is one of the best that do that. And, and I look for that one file, and I look for that file type. And then all of a sudden I find that one. And now I'm finding things that the program itself aren't. But the programs themselves, the technology is getting better. I mean, but things are changing too. I mean, look at all the different file systems that are out there now. I mean, it used to be you had DOS, and you had FAT16, FAT32. I mean, now you've got XFS, NTFS. I mean, you've got ZFS. You've got all these ones, plus all the Linux ones, the XT2, 3, 4. I mean,
you got Apples.
Apple. Wow, yeah, they're Teletubby land. Yeah. So it.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean. Well, I mean, I'll give you my theory on Apple later, but but you're right. I mean, Apples are the way Apple does their operating system forensically, they are a challenge. And, but it takes guys thinking outside the box, like you just said. Technology gets me so far, but then you've got the guys that go, oh, I'll bet I can write something that'll do that. Or I'll bet I can use this and this to do that. And
one of my favorite scripts, I remember we had this where we would run this, like one of the first things we would run once we have a drive image, we would go look for all the files where the extension did not match the header of the file, right? So this says TXT, but that's actually a graphic interchange format. It's a GIF file or a PNG, or it's like and unfortunately a lot of the cases I ended up getting attached to were where somebody was reported by somebody else in their department for looking at or having inappropriate images on their we call that porn on their laptop. But unfortunately what ended up happening is about a third of those you kind of went, oh man, now I got to call a federal agency because now you're going to jail. But a lot of that stuff, like there was active programs that would convert and go through and convert an entire section inside of a directory from .jpeg to a .txt and then back again when you needed it. And we go find those because we learned that was a cloaking hiding method. And that was that. I remember that kind of stuff because you couldn't really do that at scale by hand until the tech came along, was able to do that for you.
Right. Well, look at stenography. I mean, the average person's going to look at the two files; they're the same, except the file sizes are different. And it took somebody going, wait a minute, I have two identical files that when I pull them up in the viewer, they look the same. But why is this file size so much different? Somebody figured out they were writing at the end of where where it was on the hard drive, and they're like, wait, I can pad that data in there and I can hide data in there. And talking about inappropriate pictures, that was one of the things they used to hide, in the back end. And it took somebody to go, wait a minute, let me write something that takes those headers and splits it out and gives me both of the images in that. And then the technology got picked up as people write all these scripts and people do that. The manufacturers all take that and they incorporate it into their next revisions of their products. But
Yeah, there was always the race between bad guys, building the better mouse, and the good guys building the better mousetrap. Right? We were permanently trying to figure out what am I not seeing here? It's that weird intuitive hunch where you're staring at a drive image and you're like, this looks too clean.
Yes.
Like this looks sterile. Right. Something's wrong. Like what is wrong? Where is it? Oh, there's a hidden partition. Or that was the favorite. You could God, remember what was the
Veracrypt and TrueCrypt?
TrueCrypt.
Yeah.
Where you could create drive partitions in a file, and you're like, wow, there's a 10 gig file here with no extension. I wonder what that is. You're like, oh,
yeah. No, I mean it's but again, it took somebody noticing that there was a 10 gig file with no extension, and it took somebody to sit and figure out how to do it. But in the old days, that probably wouldn't have imaged well, going back to the hardware and the software. But in today's world, I mean, the software that makes the image is doing a better job of making the image than it used to. It's more complete. And, the error checking is much better to make sure that you get a clean image. And, and the ability to process that image and carve things out and put it into a nice logical format for people to follow is getting a whole lot better than it used to be in the old days. So.
Is there difficulty? We talked about people coming in entry level, going through like a training program at school. Mm-hmm. What's the barrier there? You have to find somebody that one can think logically like that, but also the flip side of that, and what we just talked about with inappropriate images.
Yeah.
Like there's got to be a mental barrier for some that say like, I can't look at this stuff, and they don't realize that until they get into it. And they're like, well, wait a minute, this isn't what I thought. I thought I was just looking for, and then all of a sudden you start seeing stuff that you can't unsee. Like, is that how big of a barrier is that for weeding out people that would be good at the role, but then don't continue because of that side of it?
A lot stop because of that. I mean, and I've had some students that do it for a living, and if they don't want to do that stuff, I recommend that they go work for a law firm, or they go work for somewhere like that, where most likely they're never going to run into that, and they're going to be searching for documents and things like that on hard drives. They're not going to be getting down into the weeds and looking at that kind of stuff. But it is, the first couple times you do it, it haunts you. And I mean, it haunts your dreams, and it haunts your day. You see it. And so
are there things that help cut back on that? Like it used to be.
There is. Yeah. So
I
now
never did forensics, but there used to be things like, when you did something, like you'd have a hash of a file, right? So
yes.
Like, do the tools have capability that says, hey, look, I detected this hash. I'm not showing you the picture, but I can tell you that this file
There are national
is this without having to see it.
There are national databases now that collect all those hashes and collect all those. And you can run that first, and it will tell you whether or not any of those hashes showed up on your image. And if it did, then without looking at it, you can put it to the side and have somebody that comes and does that. They have that. A lot of that, though, you have to subscribe to. It's not built in. You have to go subscribe to it. A couple of them you have to be law enforcement to get. But they are public databases. I know there's one in Idaho that they collect as many as they can, and they put it all in a big database. And you can, when you go to process your image, one of the check boxes is look for this kind of material, and you put it in, and you put your account info in, and it will pull that down so that when it processes those pictures, it'll identify them for you. Because of the legality. I mean, it's federal. Right. Boom. As soon as there's one picture, so many pictures, it's federal violation, and at that point, you're obliged to turn it over. And two, you have a lot of people that are really, really good at it that never want to get into that side of it, and you don't want to ruin
for obvious reasons, I think, right?
Yeah,
right.
Oh, absolutely. God bless the people that do that. Because it's necessary evil, But that does actually. I've had one or two students say, "Well, I never want to see that," and they change their major and become a sysadmin or something instead, or they go on and be CISOs instead of doing the forensic side of the house because they never want to run into that kind of stuff. And and then when I explain like searches and seizures, and a lot of them are like, "Oh, I never want to go to somebody's house. I just want to sit in my little cubicle, and I just want to do this." That's fine. Just pick the industry where that happens. Don't pick law enforcement. I mean, pick something else. Pick a law firm, pick a litigation firm, pick a forensics company, a smaller forensics company, because you're going to get hired to go on site, and most of the time the stuff's going to come to you, and you're going to be able to do it. So you can direct students, and you can hopefully keep them in the desire and keep them in the field. By just giving them the options, and I try and give them real world. I mean, I go out and get the most current stuff happening, and I make an image and I show them, this is what's happening. And because, showing them something that happened 6 years ago, while that's neat and the same techniques are being used, all of that stuff gets caught by your basic low-level antivirus, and so the likelihood of seeing something that I saw 6 years ago, seeing it today, is less. So, when I teach, I try and bring the most current information that I can to keep them interested, because showing them stuff that happened 6 years ago is cool, but showing them what happened yesterday, and then they go home and they hear about all these data breaches, and you're like, hey, here's a macro, here's a Word document with a macro in it, and it does this, or here's an Excel spreadsheet with a macro. And, how many of you opened it when I sent it to you?
All of them.
Yeah, all of them. And I'm like, that's what happens in your workplace, and I try
let me ask you.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, because this is something that I've been, as you've been talking, my head's been going to. Where is the state of the art going? How much of the process of acquiring, processing, and analyzing an image or a case is moving towards automation? I ask that because I'm starting to see, implications of ML AI creeping into forensics, and I'm like, where is this going?
So there's two parts to that question. One, automation is definitely increasing. I mean, you take the full NK suite, and if I'm an environment, and I know some companies that run it, I can sit at my desk and I can image a machine across the network. I can do a live image and a RAM dump across the network, dump it to a server, and process it all automatically. That's great. From a corporation standpoint, that kind of automation is wonderful. It makes it so that if I have, an employee that I know is taking company data and they're giving it to a competitor, I can image their machine without them knowing, find the evidence, and I'm good. From a forensic standpoint, that kind of automation is good, but not as good as if I have somebody sitting down processing that image and looking at those results, and not just relying on the reports, the predefined reports that come out of the software.
Fair enough.
So the automation is great. It makes it easier for everybody, but there's still that obligation to get somebody in front of the image and process that image and put not the automated stuff looking at it, put the human in front of it and that thinks differently, thinks outside the box, looks for different things and goes, wait, that doesn't look right. The software's not going to do that. Software is only programmed to do what you told it. You still have to get the box, the human in front of it. And so that's kind of a double-sided, sword. We moved to automation because I don't want to have a whole room full of analysts. I only want to have a few analysts, for the times I need it. From a corporation standpoint, from a forensic standpoint, I prefer the room full of analysts.
Well, yeah, but you want to be able to do the heavy lifting, the heavy processing, like all the repetitive tasks, right? It's like being in a SOC, James. I think the analogy applies, where the stuff that tech can find on its own, you want it to just be able to just process and filter,
absolutely,
and then go right, and then present the analyst with that. Okay, this looks interesting. Maybe you should take a look at this because you have a brain that can process this that computers still can't.
But the problem is like SOAR when we talked about it, Raf. Like, I mean, it takes me back a couple episodes to that when we're talking about SOAR and the whole process around that. Like, what's the purpose of it? What's it doing? And it definitely sounds like it just depends on what your purpose that you're trying to do, right? Like, if you're just trying to find somebody doing something, like there's automation that can help do that, and it'll probably detect it pretty well. If you've got a breach of some sort, or there's something specific you're looking for, that automation ain't going to help as well.
Automation,
that, right?
No, and we run into that all the time. I mean, automation gets you so far. Automation points you in the right direction, but automation's not going to find the 4 or 5 artifacts that tie the whole picture together that I need.
That's where the melon comes in, right?
That's it, right? And so the automation is good, but again, the automation only does what it's been told to do. So if the people writing the automation are only thinking of one thing, that's where they're going to write the automation to look at, and it's going to miss and skip all this other stuff. So
does that mean there's a propensity for, and I want to ask this carefully, is that mean there's a propensity for introducing bias into these forensic investigation type of platforms and systems that we don't intend, that
bias
potentially does some
fun
harm?
One. Bias is a fun one because there's bias everywhere. Software has bias. The examiner has bias. And removing the bias is a big one. I mean, but you're right. I mean, and what's interesting is competition between the groups that make the software. Each one advertises they do one thing better than the other. I mean, so we're biased you bias it that way. So I think, barring the stuff that has federal statutes, because everybody does that, and everybody is pretty equal on the playing field with that. But everybody's trying to come up with the next, I do this better than you, and I do this better than you, and I think that's great, and the software's come a long way, but I still think that sometimes the focus gets lost on, I still need, at the end of the day, if my software didn't find it, I still need someone to sit down in front of there and look at what the software did, and then make the next logical step and go find what the software didn't do. Or hopefully the software gave me some nuggets that I can go jump on and move that way. I work a lot where they rely on the automation. Well, we ran it through this, or we had a firm come in and this is what they gave us. And it's just a bunch of printed reports from the automation. And then they say, here's your timeline of what happened. And you're looking at that and going, but this event has nothing to do with this one, and this one has nothing to do with this one. Just because they happened one after another doesn't mean that they're related. I mean, 3 people went to 3 different 7-Elevens at the same time doesn't mean that those 3 people are related at the 7-Eleven. I mean, and so a lot of times I think the automation, and people rely on it too much.
Fair enough.
And again, going back to the schools, it's tough to teach a good forensics curriculum because you have to get students. I mean, you have to show them the software. You have to show them how to do it. You have to make them sit in front of it and go through the steps. Giving them a book and having them read about it just isn't the same. And so, from a company standpoint, even hiring a forensic analyst, I know that once I hire them, now I got to train them. I got to train them how to use NCASE. I got to train them how to go to SANS training. I got to train them how to do this. And I know I have a certain amount of expenditures to get that person to where they can function on their own without having people watch over them.
Hey, That's a good point, and I was going to let you finish on that, but I've got one more. In places like the SOC and those types of jobs, there's a pretty high propensity for young in career, comes into a company, gets lots of training, and goes, cool, next job.
Yep.
Is that happening in yours as well? And what do you guys? What is the forensics world doing about it?
Lots of turnover. I mean, people get into it and they succeed, and then once you succeed, you get noticed, and then you move up. And my dad used to say it: "You work for money." I mean, I don't work for free. I work for money. And you take these young kids and you offer them a little bit more money, they're going to move up, and they're going to move out. And so the ones that stay in the forensics longest is your law enforcement personnel, because that's what they go into. They transition into the forensic side, and that's what they do. They do forensics for the bulk of their law enforcement career. And we're able to keep them in it. In the private sector, it's a little bit harder, because the forensics jobs, while they pay, the forensics themselves don't pay as much as, say, if I'm a director, or I'm an executive director, or a CISO, or a CTO, or something like that.
Right.
It doesn't pay. Plus, the experience you get from the forensics prepares you to move up. Because doing the forensics, I'm learning not just forensics, but I'm learning about networks, and I'm learning about Active Directory, and I'm learning about accounts, and I'm learning about lateral movement. I'm learning about email, and I'm learning about Exchange, and I'm learning about AWS and Azure. So I'm learning all these topics while I'm doing forensics, because I have to know those topics to do the forensics.
Damn it! Now I got another one. Okay, last one. Is that something that you come in to learn the forensics field? You get a background in the how and why, the theory and practice of forensic investigation, and you learn the technology you apply it to, or do you think it's better the other way around, where you know the network, you know how to write some code, you know how Active Directory works, you know how packets go from point A to point B, and then you go do a forensic specialty. That one? Yeah,
that way.
That's what I expected.
Yep, and I think a lot of the people that get into forensics get into it out of curiosity, because they know the network. They use Wireshark, or they have a problem. And a lot of the forensics starts from your sysadmins, your network admins, and your SOCs and your NOCs, because I have a problem. Something goes down, something's not working right. What do? I do network forensics. I go look at the packets going across. I look at the handshakes. I look at the authentications. I look at the path that things are taking. That's forensics. You just don't call it forensics. You call it research or investigation. And I think a lot of the people that get into this start on that side of the house and go, man, this is really interesting. It took me an hour and a half, or it took me 3 days to figure out why these two applications weren't working. Found out it was a firewall rule, or my firewall was doing stateful inspection or not stateful inspection. It was tearing apart the SSH packets. That's all forensics. And so I think most of the people start on that side of the house. They have basic networking knowledge and basic computer knowledge. And then they get into the forensics because they enjoy trying to find that little nugget that ties the piece, that last piece of the puzzle. And, they like telling the story. Forensics allows you to tell the story.
Interesting.
Data breach. I like
that rap.
Yeah.
I like that rap. Forensics allows you to tell the story. All right.
It does.
While we didn't get a diving cat, we did get an intro to Mochi. Is that his name?
Yeah, Mochi. He's down here sleeping somewhere. There he is. He's just sleeping.
I see a tail. Nice.
There he is.
There it is. There he is. That is the most adorable cat.
You're going to come say hi now? Okay. Oh, there we go. Now he's going to come sleep. So
that makes me almost want to get a cat, but I've got a rabbit, so that would be a bad idea.
Yeah.
All right. So. Cool, man. That was a great conversation. It's a field that I've always been adjacent to. It's always been interesting. And I'm definitely forensic curious. So I thanks for joining us. This has been fun. folks, if you've been listening along, hopefully you picked up something. It's a great field, and I'm kind of curious if you guys are listening. If you've ever been to any of the I guess it's open text now, but Enfuse. James and I got invited a couple years ago. We went out. It was a lot of fun. Man, you learned some stuff that as an average infosec person you just never run into. Like there's a couple of talks that absolutely blew the lid off my head, and this is just kind of fun stuff. And I gotta tell you, Michael, I miss my Encase days. I miss the days of being able to image a drive and just go looking for something that wasn't supposed to be there.
Yep. Encase, I tell you what, Encase has some things in it that others don't. It really does. I mean, conditions, filters. The bottom panel on the Encase GUI is far superior to any of the others, and what you can do with it. And to blow equipment, I tell you what, that is, if you don't have it, you're missing out. I mean, get it just to have it, just so you can tell people you got it, man. Go buy one just so you can say you've got it. I got a T8U, I got my USB 3 drive locker, man. I mean, I'm good. I can go out and do what I need, and
good times. Good times. All right. Hey, well, I'm hoping that they do the conference again this year in person, so that we get to go out again, and that would be a lot of fun. But folks, thanks for listening. Thanks for spending the last, I don't know, was it 45 minutes or so with us? Woo! Yeah. That got longer than I expected, but that's all right. It was awesome. Thanks for spending the time with us. James, thanks for being a part of the show as always.
Yeah, I love when we talk the forensic stuff. I mean, like you said, even when we went out to the conference, man, it's always interesting, the stuff that happens, and just not in my world right now. So it's always great to learn more about it.
You kind of feel like a little bit like 007 sometimes. It's kind of fun. Yeah. So, alrighty, guys, thanks for listening, folks. This has been another Down to Security Rabbit Hole podcast coming at you. I will post this video at some point, and you'll get to see the world's most adorable cat, a kitten. And Michael, thank you for joining us. OpenText, thanks for letting us borrow your time for a bit. And we will catch you another time, another place on another Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. Ciao, y'all.
As we fade out on another Down the Security Rabbit Hole episode, we'd like to encourage you to chat with our hosts and guests using the Twitter hashtag #DtSR. Please check out the show notes, catch up on any episodes you may have missed, and subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. So on behalf of Rafal, James, for now it's goodbye. We'll see you soon on another Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast.